Please subscribe to help you and your motorcycle perform better. One of my favorite things to do when I travel abroad is to do a suspension tuning ride. That's usually limited to about 8 people, and we take your motorcycle, and step 1 is to set preload front and rear to set sag appropriately based on your weight. Step 2 is to ride for about 50 kilometers, stop, set rebound correctly front and rear so that the bike is perfectly balanced. Go another 50 kilometers for stop number 3, which is assess fork travel and shock travel used to see what needs optimizing is probably the best word for that. And then step 4 is to stop for lunch, and at that point do a debrief and ask people what would they like to change. Responses can go from "you touch this bike, I will thump you," through to "I don't know what to change," and in which case I'll make an advice or guidance based on, for example, fork and shock travel for levels of comfort. Or I'll ask the person, is the bike bouncing around too much? All the bumps come through to you, so the bike itself is just too busy. But one of the most important parts of the suspension tuning ride is the emergency stop or braking drills that we do, because we have to guarantee that you and your motorcycle do not end up in an emergency braking situation. And able to do that, riders get 3 separate runs at 60, 70, and 80 kilometers an hour, specifically for an urban environment, to be able to brake as hard as they can within their comfort and skill set, and then for me to change preload and compression damping to be able to optimize the settings so that the bike can brake and give them confidence in that emergency braking drill. Before I can do that, well, I have to know where mechanical bottom out is, right? Without that knowledge, how do you know that you're setting the suspension up correctly for them to be able to ride and learn? A very, very specific skill set, and with that very specific skill set, feel confident and empowered to brake aggressively. Every suspension tuning ride has to really guarantee that when you brake hard, you're not going to maximize your travel, end up hitting mechanical bottom out, and then losing the rear grip. That creates all kinds of emotional problems where the bike starts to tip up and you want to let go of the brake because you're worried about the bike coming up in the air. Very few of us are stunt riders capable of big endos and doing it safely and smiling at the same time. So, Sharpie pen, stretch the forks out, and we're using the loaner bike that came from Ross at Two Ball Bikers because my MT thermostat broke. So, extended. We're at 165 millimeters from the bottom of the lower triple clamp to the joint of the dust seal with the leg. Now, riding normally, not hammering the brakes, I am using 120 millimeters of travel. So what we've got to do is go look at the book based on what the book says and see how much travel I actually have. In riding around normally and seeing this much travel, there's a question as to whether I am already hitting mechanical bottom out. And as that cable tie does not have a Sharpie mark on it anywhere, as the chrome tube does not have a Sharpie mark on it anywhere, the cable tie has no reference point. And if there's no reference point, what does the cable tie tell you? Actually, not a whole lot other than it got to here. So next is to go do some research and figure out where am I for maximum travel, and am I already there? If I'm already there, then there's a problem, right? I can't brake any harder, and I'm riding around braking normally in urban traffic here in Wellington. So I do have a significant issue that I may need to address based on the information that I find out. So next, let's use the phone, go online, and see what the specs are. Now, going online and looking at the specifications for the CB500X, which is what this model is, it says travel is 150 millimeters or 5.9 inches. Okay, so that means if we're 165 mil fully extended, 15 millimeters down is going to be our mechanical bottom out, because this chrome tube is obviously much longer than this black leg that moves up and down. So 15 millimeters up is going to be right there. And that is the bottom of the cable tie marking it. So I'm going to get a black marker pen and put a little dot right here, which tells me that's my maximum. Now, if we look where we were on the travel we were using before, we're actually nowhere near mechanical bottom out. So as far as city urban riding in Wellington goes, I'm doing fine. I still have, on average, roughly 20 to 30 millimeters left, because there's a series of tree rings, almost in oil and dust rings, that show me where I'm going. That's why I'm not washing the bike. I want to see how much fork travel I'm using. So for now, if I want to go practice emergency braking drills, the travel I'm using allows me to go practice with confidence because I'm not at mechanical bottom out. And then having our little black mark up here gives the cable tie context. Now, how close do you want to get to that bottom out mark? Well, you need a buffer. And a buffer is roughly, quick and dirty, your index finger. Bottom out mark here, cable tie under here, but cable tie mustn't touch your skin. That's a very quick, simple way of doing it visually if you want to do it that way. Ideally, for those that want a tape measure and want an empirical number, somewhere between 20 to 25 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch to an inch, somewhere in that range gives you a buffer, because we will never react and respond like we would if a kid comes out from between a parked car while we're doing our emergency drills. Our instinct won't let us do that unless we deliberately get our skill level to that point so we can execute that ferocity of braking that quickly. So for now, every time I get a bike, I want to know where that bottom out is, mark it, put the cable tie on, and then go see how the rider performs given what we have, and that will then guide, do we need thicker oil, do we need more oil, do we need heavier springs, is the geometry wrong, how can I go ahead and fix it to create braking stability for the individual owner. And on the suspension tuning ride, what we are doing there with emergency stops allows me to dial in preload and compression, if they're available, to be able to support better braking, meaning more braking force over a longer period of time without taking stability away from the chassis. The textbook and the real world often can kind of mingle, and sometimes they're completely diametrically opposed because we find something that we know works better. So in this case, yes, your optimal travel is going to be a buffer of 15 to 25 mil. Sure, that's no problem. But when you have much longer travel suspension, let's say a ADV type touring bike with 170 to 230 millimeters of travel versus your standard road bike that has 110 to 130 millimeters of travel, then imagine all that braking force going through all that stroke. So sometimes we don't want that much travel, especially when we're braking, because the difference in the bike diving over almost damn near double the distance is too intimidating for the rider. So then we come up with what is an optimal solution for that rider themselves. So that travel may be halfway, that travel may be 2/3, or it may be 3/4. It doesn't matter. What matters is the rider feels extremely confident in an emergency braking drill situation. And knowing that they feel confident when it does happen, then their instinct will go ahead and commit to the braking, versus there be a moment of hesitation knowing the bike's going to dive. So there's a big, let's say there's a big kind of gray area there. I want the bike to work for the individual. I don't want the motorcycle to be a textbook perfect thing, because we're all so different and also unique. So bear in mind when you do this and you start dialing in, be flexible in your thinking. Be flexible in the way you approach this, and try different travel points from halfway to 2/3 to 3/4 to 10 mil from the actual mechanical bottom out. See what works for you. We're all different. Respect that uniqueness and find what you need.